Rob, you were sharing with me when we were walking over here that you're a close friend of Mathieu Ricard, who spoke to us this morning, and after the talk that I'm sure many of you attended, he mentioned to me that his mother, shortly before she passed away, shared with him a line that that went like this: stillness is the language of the future. And maybe we can also say embodied presence and movement is the language of the future. So thank you. Thank you also, Rob, for the journey into 2030, which was illuminating, and I felt like it put all of us into a different space. That is very much needed, as we all know. And I feel that in our current time that's often referred to as a time of disruption, we live in a time of things breaking apart. We live in a time of collapse. We live in a time where one civilization is dying, while another civilization is in the process of being born. The one that is dying is based on extraction and ecosystem awareness, and the one that's in the process of being born is based on regeneration and ecosystem awareness. And when you look at this image here, this drawing, we live in between these two walls, right? We know a lot about the one on the left-hand side, which is essentially the one that's ending and dying. We know a lot less about the emerging future, about what's happened, what the future might look like. Yes, we have reports, but we don't know for sure. And what we know least about is how to move from here to there. It's the process that moves us from one side to the other. And the current moment is really a moment where we participate in both of these worlds, right? We are in this in-between space. And how to do that, how to move from one to the other, how to organize around something that's emerging, has been the key question for me the past 25 years as an action researcher. And what I found is what it takes is a journey that is both an outer journey that takes us to the places of most potential, and we just had a fantastic example of that, right? All these places already exist, right? The future is already here. And it's also a journey that connects, it's also an inner journey that essentially is connecting us with our deeper sources of knowing, right? It's connecting us with that aspect of our experience where the future is already present in the now. It's not something we need to project. It's something that's already present in the now. And that's the place we want to connect with. I went to MIT some 28 years ago to learn about systems thinking. And when you look, you have seen this iceberg model many times. When you look at the world from a systems perspective, what do we see? we collectively create results that pretty much no one wants. And we heard many examples of that around the ecological divide, the social divide, and the pandemic of mental health, kind of the spiritual divide. And systems thinking essentially is asking the question, why? Why do we keep collectively enacting results that individually most people say they don't want? And these three terms, structures, paradigms of thought, and the deeper sources of our creativity, of our self, of our energy, of our inspiration, is in a nutshell, capture in a nutshell, the evolution of systems thinking in the past few decades. And to summarize, so all four levels together, including the symptoms, is something, this deepened understanding of systems thinking is something that I and some of my colleagues refer to as awareness-based systems change that can be summarized with these four principles. One, you cannot understand a system until you change it. Famously, Kurt Lewin, the founder of Action Research. You cannot, study the new just by watching it from outside. Two, you cannot change a system until you transform consciousness. Let me rephrase that. You cannot change a system until you transform the mindsets of the people who are enacting the system moment to moment. So the real question is, how do we actually do that? And what we learned there is this. You can't transform consciousness until you make a system see, sense, and invert itself. So seeing itself is clear, right? It's kind of looking into the mirror, right? Kind of a systems mapping or something. Sensing is, if I only see what's broken with the system, I'm very unlikely to change my behavior. I need to feel it, right? What it feels like on the other side of the divide. And that's really the gateway to collective creativity and to real change. And the invert is really the outer and the inner, right? That I first need to change something here in order to be able to change something out there. And lastly, you can't lead systems transformation until you sense and presence or embody the future as it emerges. So be the change you want to see. What I learned, one of the main things that I learned over the years is this, that there is an invisible dimension of change and leadership that often is not talked about. So one way of articulating is this. The success of an intervention as a change maker, as a leader, depends on the interior condition of the intervener. So the success of what I do depends on not only what I do and how I do it, but from the inner place, the quality of awareness, the quality of consciousness. The quality of presence I'm showing up with, I'm bringing to a situation. So how can you map that inner place, this invisible dimension? And this is how today I would map that in terms of three capacities: open mind, open heart, open will, aka curiosity, compassion, courage. And what these capacities do is they move us beyond downloading. Downloading is same old, kind of we just reenact old patterns collectively or individually. And open mind essentially means the capacity to suspend old judgments and to see with fresh eyes. Open heart essentially means to look at a situation through the eyes of another. And open will essentially means to let go of the old and to let come of something new that is emerging. That basically, I believe, is the deeper territory of leadership. But when we look around, right, particularly in our mediarized world, what do we see? We see pretty much the exact opposite of everything I just shared with you, which is not an opening of the mind, heart, will, but a freezing of the mind, heart, and will, aka a huge amplification of ignorance, hate, anger, and fear. And so instead of this seeing and sensing, we move into the denial and desensing, right? We heard this morning many examples of this, right? Sandrine was talking about the denial industry, right? And so so we have social media and putting us into these filter bubbles and so on and so forth. So we have huge amplifiers up here, very little down here. And what I'm basically saying is this. Look, the only thing we know about the future is disruption is going to stay. Whenever disruption happens, we have a choice. And the choice is whether we respond by closing down and turning away, or whether we respond by turning toward and opening up. And when we close down and turn away, we activate one kind of process that by now we all know pretty well. While when we turn toward and open up, we activate another kind of process that by now we also know very well. So when you step back and say, okay, so these are two different social dynamics, two different social fields, we all know both of them. The first one is defined by architectures of separation and leading, right, to patterns of destruction and self-destruction, while the other one is based on architectures of connection that leads to pattern of co-creation. But then you wonder, what is the independent variable? What really does it depend on whether we activate one or the other? And I believe the answer to that question is consciousness. It's how we attend to a situation, whether that is arising from ecosystem awareness or from ecosystem awareness. And what I mean by ecosystem awareness is an awareness that originates from inside the boundary of one's own system, right? Inside the ego. And what I mean with ecosystem awareness is an awareness that originates from beyond the boundary of my system. How? By opening the mind, opening the heart, like looking kind of empathic, listening, and opening the will. So I want to give you an example for that. And the example is probably the most underrated leadership capacity of all time, which is listening. And so I want to offer you a distinction of 4 different levels of listening. And so the first one is downloading, which is not real listening, but just reconfirming what we already know. We operate from our essentially kind of from our patterns of judgment or what our existing experience. Then it's factual listening is leading to disconfirming data, seeing something new, seeing with fresh eyes. The third level is empathic listening, seeing through another person's eyes, kind of really kind of seeing from a different perspective that was not kind of part of our understanding before. And the fourth one really is about when something new is being born, when something is beginning to emerge that wasn't there before. Okay, what I'm saying is whether the outcome is this, or this depends on the inner place from that we operate. And I want to demonstrate that inner place with a little gesture now. And so I'm kind of, I will be embodying that. And level 1 is basically I'm projecting what I already know, right? It's like this. I'm not actually seeing what's happening out there. I'm projecting what I already know, and that can be in sync with or not with actually what's happening outside. Level 2, factual listening, is this. So I attend very focused. I'm not looking left or right. I'm very focused on whatever my question is asking, and that's how I gather data. That's kind of how I pay attention in a focused way to reality. Level 3 listening is this. Empathic listening is this. So see kind of how my attention comes from here, and I focus whatever the object is that I'm studying. Level 3 is this. I'm more connecting to the whole situation. The center of gravity of my attention is moving from here to here, right? It's still also here, but it's kind of moving to a deeper level. So that's level 3 attention, level 3 listening. We all remember that. We know these situations, right? It's a different gesture. And level 4 maybe could be something like this. So level 4, as you saw, takes me to a different level. So it's a different inner stance how you relate with reality, not just in terms of, okay, who is in front of me, but reaching out more this way and also more this way. You're broadening and deepening the attention. You're decentering yourself a little bit, and you are beginning to hold a space that is not only attending towards there, but also to what maybe is wanting to emerge. So that's the orientation of your attention. And essentially, what we do in our practical work is to practice that capacity. That's a capacity that needs to be built, and that's something that we practice. So let me just, essentially what I just said is, I demonstrated a mindset shift from an old way of looking into reality. I'm here, the observed system is out there, to one where we broaden and deepen that view by bending the beam of observation back onto the observing self. By not only attending in the simple way, but also paying attention to our attention and bringing in all these multiple perspectives. And that's something that we practice in many applied situations, a multi-stakeholder process with indigenous leaders, regenerative energy leaders, and government people in Colombia a couple of months ago, with mapping techniques, with mapping techniques that bring in the voice of the planet, the voice of future generations, and the voice of those that in the current governance system are not heard. We do that in very traditional old institutions like the UN, or the SDG leadership labs, the UN country teams, and humanitarian response in 26 countries. Seeing a number of interesting changes and observations there. And I want to end with a distinction that gives you a lens to look at the current reality. And it's basically a distinction between 4 types of operating system that I am observing in any kind of system I see today. So for example, and that today, and that evolves from input and authority-centric to output and efficiency-centric to outcome and user-centric to 4.0 regenerative and ecosystem-centric. So whereas the mainstream today, it's 2.0, right? Output and efficiency. Teaching for testing, evidence-based medicine, industrial agriculture, resource, basically sustainability in business that only focus on resource efficiency and extractive capital. We see a lot of innovation here. Many of the innovators are here, but what we need to do as a movement is to move to 4.0, and which deals with whole person, whole systems learning, strengthening the sources of well-being and health, regenerative agriculture with food as medium of healing planet and people, and so forth. So basically, what I'm saying is we face 4.0 challenges. That's what kind of basically everyone tells us. What our societal response mechanisms are, they are limited to 2.0, sometimes 3.0, and that the hard truth is that more of this is not getting us there. What we need to do is to really focus on these kinds of ecosystems and the towns of the future, where the 2030 is already happening right now. Connect them and grow them, support them, and bring them to scale. And that one of the most important enabling conditions missing here is deep learning infrastructures that support these kinds of systems through building these deeper transformation capacities. Thank you very much.